Hello everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Marg series of Building a Learning Culture in the Organization. Today I'm delighted to introduce Nikhil Benegal, who is here with us for this session. Nikhil is with 33 years of experience in learning and development and leadership, especially with leadership. And he has been in organizations like Unilever and Coates PLC. Now he is very busy with his executive coaching and behavioral assessment work, which he does. But what has always intrigued him, I suppose, is how individuals and organizations learn. And he has spent so much time in understanding that in real detail. So Nikhil, welcome. And jumping into the first question is, you've seen learning evolve. So how do you think learning itself has evolved in organizations? Pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, whichever way you would like to say, or over the years as such.
Sure. Thanks, Sudeshna, for having me. In many ways, for me, learning has really been about, a permanent change in behavior, right? So whether it be, maybe one could look at it in three different levels. For example, hands-on applications, right? So it's really an extension of using the hands, limbs. So it could be, training for using tools, implements, then machines, even say vehicles, right? So that kind of training, hands-on application. From my experience, it's been, pretty well organized. There's been, the download of the concept, tools, the practice, and then, the practice, the evaluation, the testing, the evaluation, and the feedback, that part of it, really well organized. Maybe a next level of learning would be using of data, using of information, so that, that can be processed and used for decision making, for problem solving. Mm-hmm. So that's another level. Typically, when one looks at mid-manager, say even frontline manager, middle manager, and then some form of leadership training, the approach has been more in that area. Here, from the way I look at it, is that there's also an interplay between how one controls or manages the conditions under which learning happens. This organizing this permanent change in behaviors, what one does mm-hmm. and what one mm-hmm. says. Mm-hmm. Here what happens is, and in contrast to what you would see in, hands-on application kind of training, where the conditions are pretty controlled and at times even regimented. Whereas with, when it came to using information to improve problem solving and decision making, a lot more autonomy, a lot more, freedom was given for individuals who got this download of, concepts and tools and information. To convert that into knowledge, it was left to them. It was, what we call self-directed learning. Mm-hmm. So while that has happened, so learning and development departments started, focusing on creating content, putting it into a palatable form for delivery, mm-hmm. delivering it. And then, of course, like has been my experience, working with you all earlier, there's a lot of follow-up in terms of ensuring that, this process of not just the introduction, but also the instantiation, mm-hmm. From the conceptual abstract into the more concrete, the doing part. That has happened, or that has been aimed for. And then the next stage is, of course, more practice, mm-hmm. application, what I call adaptive, mm-hmm. Adapting these concepts and tools to different situations based on the context of the learner. Mm-hmm. And then habituation, right? That's when the behavior really changes. So here it was left, at least at this level of learning, more to self-directed or self-managed. Mm-hmm. And, be that as it may, my experience, we have had workshops, we had blended learning programs. While, me being an L&D professional, spend a lot of time thinking about these things, trying to get these, off the ground. I've come to a conclusion, of course, quite some time back, but pretty convinced that self-directed learning is a challenge, right? For various reasons, we could talk about that. And maybe the next stage of learning, which would be really the evolution, which I would see, is really about, how do I, particularly if I'm doing leadership training, or let's say leadership development, how would the leader change the way that they look at different situations, it's after all a matter of interacting with one's environment, whether it be external, internal. I would look at internal being psychological, emotional, and external being the physical, social, right, environment. Do I begin to look at it in different ways?
Okay.
So that is something which, while we give a download, typically even in a blended learning program from my experience, over a long period, maybe even over 6 months, that challenge remains because there is this pressure or expectation that a leader or a manager or anyone which you put through this kind of process does the self-directed learning.
That is good.
Right? So maybe just a word on why I feel it doesn't work or why it hasn't worked. This is from my experience. As an individual, I've been a manager in operations as well. What really happens? There's always the expectation from the environment, the culture, let's say the boss and generally the organizational environment, to get things done, to show the short-term result, and it all adds up to the long term. And so what do I do as a manager or as a leader? I focus on getting, on doing the best I can, what I really know.
But it is staying within that particular boundary, you mean to say that, I'm doing what makes my manager happy.
Yeah.
That kind of
whatever has been set as, the goals and the framework in which the policy, within which I'm allowed to operate. Yeah, whether it could be restrictive or whether there's more autonomy. Even so, there is an expectation for the short term. That kind of leads me to spend, because, to come back to what would I do as an individual? I can do two things. I can do the best I can, and then I might want to do even better than what I can, which means I must learn. Yeah. But how much value is given to that, space is given to that learning? It depends on the ambition of the organization.
True.
Right, and the ambition of the goals. But if there is a lot of pressure on the individual
to deliver
immediately, learning takes a backseat. Right? And as a result of which, you'll find very often, I worked in very big organizations, very highly rated, there is a lot of firefighting. Okay, so you'd find the person spending more time fighting fires, and then being relieved the fire is off, and not really spending time in making systemic changes or bringing in or learning how to do that, right, and then implementing it. So as a result, the fire again starts, and then he's back to putting out the fire. So the learning takes a backseat there, and that's where self-directed learning, despite all the download, really expensive programs, get the best trainers, get the best speakers, best resources. We have found that do they really change their behavior? Because this is what any CEO would ask. Right? In what way have they changed?
How have you impacted?
In what way is the outcome on the ground changed? And are they doing things differently? So you find it difficult to defend that because you left it to them to do it. Right? So that's where I believe we've reached. There are a lot of, with technology and with, I believe, one-on-one tutoring, which we were talking about some time back, customized to the requirement of the individual, and pure play coaching, which I would say, right? Not mentoring, not counseling, but coaching. So that holds a lot of promise.
Okay. So what I am understanding is you are trying to say that it has to be not only that it left to that individual, maybe the results take a priority. That delivering results, today's results is what is priority. And if the organization is not putting that as a KPI, or rather that learning and doing something with the new learning, then it doesn't take that priority.
That's right. So that's really the culture. if one really looks at it in terms of the demands from the environment within which I'm working as a manager or as a leader, if there is no such expectation from me, what am I doing differently? Am I looking at what whatever process is ongoing, am I looking at it, doing it differently? Yeah, or even a paradigm shift, and the way that I go to market or the way I come up with a product. It's not only the traditional new product development. It's just about everything which a manager leader can do.
Yeah.
What are they really acquiring as what is needed to be done to achieve a more ambitious goal? Yeah, it's always oriented towards that ambitious goal. So, yeah, I worked in organizations which have been very ambitious. I worked in organizations which believe more in, getting that kind of procedural stability, a lot of SOPs, and do what we know how to do really well, but nothing very much beyond that. For whatever reasons, right? The reading of the industry and the market. But learning, therefore, then begins to take a backseat, right? How does an ambitious organization meet the talent gaps? They always look for hiring, right? So somebody else does the learning for that person. I pick him out of the market by attracting him in. Do they stay for a long time? Unless the environment is really supportive, it may not happen. But that's a mistake that gets made on a regular basis. Again, who gets the short or what gets the short shrift? It's L&D.
So then, in the current environment where most of the organizations we are seeing are falling in that ambitious category and wanting to, go move leaps and bounds, and that requires a change in a lot of areas. So there, how do you think learning should play a role, and what should leaders and HR do differently?
Yeah, that's a very pertinent question, because if I'm going to keep doing what I've always done and keep getting what I've always gotten, how am I going to meet my ambitious goal, right? The only answer is, okay, one option is I look at the market and, if I have the resources, attract, right? But people are getting smarter now. You don't want to go and work in an organization where, you lose your mojo, right? You'd want to keep that forward movement in developing your career. So what are the learning opportunities, any talent would ask? So the way forward is learning. Learning as in a culture which encourages, that concept of learning agility, right? That concept of, a continual process of people getting feedback in an enabling way. Yeah? We talk about psychological safety. Actually, that comes from my understanding, or at least the way I first came across that concept, was through Carl Rogers' approach to therapy, saying that what really worked was a safe environment, or rather safe relationship, the environment within that relationship, where the individual could actually look at what was holding them back, right? The same philosophy concepts have been incorporated into coaching, right? At least the International Coaching Federation competencies and their philosophy of coaching. So this psychological safety, to what degree is it there? Am I allowed to experiment? Am I allowed to try something new? Obviously within a framework.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, actually, I did a very long project with a banking company. And one of the key things that a banker, worries about is not really avoiding risk, but taking risks and managing it. And I see the link very clearly here. To what degree am I ambitious as an organization to take those risks, but also how do I manage those risks of experimentation, trying something new, the freedom to fail and learn from that failure. I know it's nice to talk about it, but having worked most of my career in an organization, yes, there is always that prick and pressure, saying that, we can't afford to lose this. You spend so much money on this, where's the ROI?
Yeah.
So those kind of things. So it is a bit of a leap of faith, but you can manage that. Yeah, you could manage that, because till the environment, otherwise, the external environment pushes you, saying that unless you reinvent yourself, your organization is not going to survive. And then you find people coming up with fantastic, responses in terms of creativity and adaptiveness. But that doesn't happen where, you're strong brand and you've got a set market and, loyal customers, and you don't think very much. You think that's going to be, the rule for the rest.
Yeah. So, a little push from the environment always, that urge to change or the need to change is like, if it is external, you feel it starts off at least, and then that self-directed learning might stick on if they feel like they are going to be able to deliver into those challenging environment. Do we challenge our people enough, you feel?
Not to learn is my view. Yeah. The challenge is for the short-term result. So let's say when I say short-term, it's broken, a long-term result broken down into quarters and things like that, or months and weeks. So typically that challenge is there, right? But are you going to be doing something differently to aim for something even larger? Managers do give very ambitious targets, but then people don't have any belief that, we can do that. I'm saying typically in a sales context, right?
Yes.
Say that, we want you to increase your market share by X, or, so much more percentage. Yeah, great. So what are we going to do differently? No one really sits around thinking. And then they accept, because nothing has really gone into changing the way we
do more
behave.
of what we used to do, right, that way.
Changing the way we behave has not been focused on. And, even some clarity, like you have an ambitious goal, you set a path towards it. What clarity do you have that this path is likely to reach that ambitious goal?
The milestones are not.
The milestones, and and then of course the resources and the ability of people to actually do that.
Yeah.
Right.
And maybe actually incentivizing the different behaviors or the different things which might take that extra mile, right?
Absolutely. So that has to come. If you're looking at, since you asked, what do the leadership do differently? What does HR do? It's really about cultivating that culture. So how do you change a culture? Yeah, the way I look at culture is really, there's a nice little, I think you may have read, I don't know if you've been introduced to that idea of, I think it was Chip and Dan Heath, who wrote a book called Shift, How Do You Change? Right? At an individual level and also at an organization level. So they pick up from what the Buddha said. He said, psychologically, we are like, the rider on an elephant, the rider and the elephant, okay? In the sense, you have your conscious or meta-conscious mind, and then you have the subconscious, unconscious, which is the elephant. And obviously the elephant is really powerful and strong, and virtually, if it's not ridden or the relationship between the mahout and the elephant is not good, the elephant takes over. It's too powerful and strong. It just does what it wants. But a third element which they introduced was the path. The elephant usually gets constrained within a certain path, the demands of the path, right? So if you change the path or you adjust the path, the elephant is going to go accordingly, right? But of course, it doesn't mean that you just, change the path in any which way, because the elephant might then rebel and, you can't constrain it too much, but it has to be gradual, right? So in a way, one can look at culture that way. It's, the path, yeah. Another way which I look at the culture which we really need to bring in organizations is the personality of the organization. If you look at individual personality, it's the preferred behaviors. So what are the generally accepted behaviors which I feel when I'm in an organization?
It's what leaders do, meaning usually what we see.
It could be what leaders do, de facto leaders do, or the immediate influencer in my social group.
Yes,
right? So what is accepted and how do you influence that? Right? So yes, you can do things like put, learning agility or growth mindset is a very important, part as a competency. Define it, and then leaders demonstrate it, they get evaluated on it. It's part of a regular conversation, and it's tracked. Yeah? And obviously that means there's a conversation around it, there's feedback around it, and then people know that, okay, this is what is accepted. This is the framework within which we can take risks. We can experiment, right? There are organizations, we have heard of Google doing it, saying that spend 20% of your time doing a new project, right? Which would improve Google's adaptivity, creativity, productivity. And the rest of 80% of your time you do your assigned job. So that kind of thing, there are various ways in which you can bring it. So one is that HR can do it or leadership can do that. Obviously, lead by example, demonstrate, right? In addition to that, hire for that. I know I said that not necessarily, but hire for agile learners, right? Also assess through surveys, the psychological safety people feel to experiment and so on, right? So that might spur someone to actually allow it. Firstly, to understand what that means, and then to allow it, right, as a leader or a manager. And then, of course, keep learning equally as important as doing the best you can, right, with available, or rather the present level of skills and capabilities and talents. You also have learning agility or growth mindset as or learning strategy as very important part of the strategy. So yeah, that's what one would expect. This happens when there is an external pressure. But can you beat the curve, right? Instead of waiting for something to happen. Be more proactive.
To that. Do you, I'm not pinpointing on anything, do you see an apathy on the part of leadership, or I'm not mentioning HR in particular, but leadership, to take up things which take a longer time to do, in the sense that, changing a culture for something which will be sticking more. They know that this will take not one day, but 15, 25 months may be required to get the whole organization aligned to something like that. So when they hear something, they plunge into doing it, or that quick fix which we talk about these days, those are kind of coming in and trying to be made handy. And then when retention happens, we are blaming only the managers.
Right. Yeah, it's the same thing, there's a huge pressure that deliver in the next quarter, deliver in the next 6 months, the year-end result. And that's what's incentivized. One really looks at the way that we remunerate, so a systemic change would be required to, build that culture. Right? Am I being rewarded for keeping a mindset of trying something new? Which is like I drew that comparison with bankers, right? You're not, as a banker, you're not going to make business, you're not going to make money if you don't take any risks. So you have to take risks, but at the same time, you've got to learn how to manage it. And your skill really is around managing the risk. Yeah? So the same thing here. Do what you know how to do really well, right? Bring in all your efficiencies and procedural, integrity and quality and all of that there. Yeah. At the same time, make space for, what you want to change, right? And what are the progress being made there? See, it's not about. One is about people's behaviors. The other is about use of technology, right?
Yeah.
Technology is available. Why are organizations holding back? Right? I'm talking particularly a little larger.
Yeah.
When you're in a startup kind of an entrepreneurial kind of environment, the pressures of the environment, whoever's invested in you or you invested in your own money, it's enormous. Yeah? So unless you do something very special, different, you're not going to, it's not a question of a long tradition of doing everything. It was very successful in the past. Right?
Correct.
So using of technology as well, right? Dealing with people, talent, available, there is a scope for the backbone of, organization, the people who do things really well, but may not really contribute to some very large, paradigm shifting, market changing contribution, but they are required. At the same time, you have others. So it's an invitation to everyone. What do you want to really come up with?
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised, we just ran, like my experience, whenever we run these, it's an old thing, ideas from workers on how to improve process. You get some fantastic ideas. We've got it for improving safety practices, we've got it for improving, machine, or the line, manufacturing unit, the line efficiencies, right? So it's come. It's not like people aren't thinking. It's just that no one taps. So that's available. Take it, give them the positive strokes, give them the recognition, etc.
Yeah.
But, okay, they are not probably going to come out with the most, mind shift bending kind of change. But you have others who are there, who are supposed to be doing that. But what degree of freedom do they have?
Yeah.
It's again about managing the risk. I'm not saying for a moment that you know.
See, the continuous improvement is a thing for, I think, for all organizations, but implementing those things become a challenge because you cannot show that radical change you are bringing in or a really earth-shattering thing will happen if you don't do this. But those improvements do matter.
Yeah. So make this, pilot it, ramp it up, But the thing is there a monitor of the senior leader? Is it coming in their mind space? Is it coming, are they looking at it or looking for it?
Yeah.
If that's not happening, you're just going to be stuck where you are. And learning development departments will only be focusing on delivering content, and saying, we gave it to them, they're not taking interest, or that's the best we can do. That's where it has languished. That's really what that's been my experience.
No, but post-pandemic world, as a training company, we have seen a surge in that it is like that little shift, I would say, of training not an expense but an investment, especially to the managers.
Right.
I think they felt the pinch.
Right.
I think organizations which had better managers thrived, I guess. So from that point of view, do you see a change after post-pandemic? Anything in context of especially the manufacturing part of the world?
Manufacturing, I wouldn't be able to say. But in terms of what you said, like what you experienced, I think it was an external pressure that made them realize that their own existential future, it's a matter of survival. So that typically is what makes people more innovative, or at least a large number of people innovative. The ones who lead the market, create that expectation and that culture, irrespective of what, even particularly when they're doing very well. But those are far and few between. Those a lot of people talk about it, but you don't experience it if you ask the employees.
Yes.
So I think that's the way. Today, with the speed of technology, particularly we've been talking about generative AI. It's going to have a huge impact. It's going to have a huge impact on learning. That's my reading of it. And I think I shared that my understanding of learning is it's about individuals changing their behavior. Social groups will follow, right? Because after all, it's individual behavior that makes the social group. And that needs a certain incubation time. Now, it could be a few weeks. Some say in 21 days you can do it and stuff. It could be even quicker because you have there's enough neuroscience behind it. You have a emotionally, I wouldn't say traumatic, but trauma also, but emotionally impactful experience, and the learning happens immediately. But let's say if you're planning that kind of change, what role can technology, particularly generative AI, play? It's huge in my reading of things. Because maybe a trainer, like your training company, using AI, can you make customized learning plans for individuals, even in a group of say 15, 20? Can you do the testing and evaluating and feedback in a very customized way for them, right? Because it's known to, there is enough research. I think person's name is Benjamin Bloom. So his research, he's a famous educationist. He said that, his research showed that there is 2 to 3 sigma improvement over a control, which is the traditional classroom training. And I think I was just mentioning to you a little while earlier, before we had this conversation, was my own experience of watching my wife do one-on-one tutoring with young kids, right? Maybe from about 5, 6 years old all the way up to maybe 6, 7, 8 standard. Huge difference in the way they pick up language, they improve in maths, they improve the retention, what they read, become better readers. Huge. And it's just because of one-on-one attention, customized. So I see that happening with, that's one clear way. Since I'm an executive coach, and I see a huge potential for pure play coaching. Okay, pure play coaching. Not mentoring, as I said, not obviously just giving a space for, important as it is, for emotional expression or counseling, but
Coaching.
yeah. So where, just that relationship, that conversational engagement is used by the learner to actually, it's kind of, let's say, in a way, kind of nudging them in the direction of what would be self-directed learning, right? And that's what really works.
Meaning they are figuring it out, but it is just that nudge the right directions, or it's
invite them to consider
options, or maybe they are stuck somewhere a little. That nudge that is being provided.
So that actually helps them to overcome what they've been otherwise avoiding. Typically, it's avoiding behavior, suppressing behavior, or distorting behavior, which keeps people from really taking the next step. Just for example, someone is now, he's been a superstar, and then you promoted him. And now he's not willing to share, let go and share what happens in cultivating the next line.
Level.
Yeah. Why is that? Because he may not articulate it, but heart of heart might feel that, oh, I'm going to lose the spotlight. And this is the reason why I was promoted, and I'm, actually now acting on, moving out of the spotlight, and someone else might overtake me, right? The same person whom I'm mentoring now or cultivating now. So that could be an unexpressed, unarticulated, feeling. And that might hold them back. Not willing to see that, they could be seen as a developer of people, and that's what a people leader is. So,
but in an organization, that can be impeding their growth.
It could impede their growth, and the organization might also be incentivizing wrongly.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's where that culture thing comes in, saying that what's the generally accepted behavior.
True. No, I think that promotion part of it, it's always right. No, we used to always say that you promote anybody who performs at the next level, not who does good work. So it was that differentiating that.
Yeah, for the next level.
Okay, we spoke on this. What keeps Nikhil going? I mean, what keeps you going, and what makes you look forward to the next day? You've been working, and in your experience, what is that trigger which helps you, just that be yourself? Because I've seen you with the same energy all the time.
See, what really motivates me, or is really, okay, I always say human behavior, but more specifically changing human behavior, right? Which is learning. So why, in a more general sense, I mean, even if one looks at it outside an organizational business, or let's say, what I'd call money and work domain of life, it is really about how can I make whatever I'm doing. It could be the most mundane things, right? I'm going for my morning walk, or, I've got to do some housework, right? How can I make that into something really intrinsically rewarding? Okay? I'm fascinated with the concept of flow, the flow states and so on. And the next level of that, which, I believe is called a higher state of consciousness. So that fascinates me. How can I move from negativity to that kind of richness? Okay? And being a coach, we develop a mindset of just being curious. You don't, essentially you don't judge, right? Don't be judgmental. There's a nice little poem by this person, Walt Whitman, American poet. Be curious, not judgmental. So I kind of keep that as my motto. So be curious about how I can do that. Yeah? And that opens up a lot of fascinating, you can even enjoy the most mundane activity. And of course, something which is otherwise, more emotionally engaging. It doesn't require much, anything from my side to do that. It just happens, right? So because it's emotionally engaging. So I'm talking about the big ticket, where, let's say, worthwhile goal pursuing and so on, where mistakes matter, right? So that's easier because of that challenge. But otherwise, because right now I can always find a lot of time on my hands if I want to. But that's not what I want to do. because I want to find more meaning in what I'm doing. So I don't know if it made sense what I'm saying, but this is really what gets me going.
Great. Anything you are reading currently which you would like to share with us, like which is like interesting in this field, maybe helpful for the professionals?
Yeah, I've always been interested in conflict management, right from, because you find it in management teams, you find it in any kind of group. So there's a book, which is an old one. I keep revisiting it, and I happen to be reading it now, which is Anatomy of Peace. It's the Harbinger Institute. I think it's an old one which really talks about if you want to be an influential person, whether you're a leader or even an individual contributor in an organization, you want to influence. What comes in the way is your way of reading a relationship which is as I feel superior to the other person because of all my degrees or my experience or my intelligence. We all try to, at least we try to, or rather not try, we believe we are very intelligent. And the other person may not be, right? Or the other flip side, that I feel that the person is much more smarter than me, more successful than me, much more powerful than me, and I feel more inferior, right? So it's like a seesaw, right? If it's either up or it's down, that comes in the way of a good relationship and an inspiring or an influential relationship. So that's, in a nutshell, what I understand from the Anatomy of Peace. So it's a great way of resolving conflict. Maybe combining it with, another philosophy which I believe in is nonviolent communication. So I introduce that in quite a few of my coaching sessions. Ask my coachee to consider it, because when in practice, it really helps to be assertive. It helps to be, helps you to be assertive, helps you to resolve conflict. It's very, very effective. Along with this, right, where I see another person as an equal, irrespective of, as human beings, we're equal. Right? That's really the focus.
And it's that context, right?
Yeah.
What you are what is in hand at that time. It should be an equal that we are starting on this thing.
Absolutely. It's like you hear so many anecdotes of famous people in leadership positions. The person talks to another in a very human to human way. And even if it's, say the Prime Minister, let's say Sam Manekshaw, who was the CEO, whatever, Field Marshal, right? He spoke to his, somebody whom he met. He used to be from the Gurkha regiment. So even he'll see somebody from the Gurkha soldier, maybe the lowermost rung. But he'll speak to him just as human to human. And he knew Gurkhali he'll speak in. And you would see that fellow light up and, probably tell his grandkids later on, this person. So I know, okay, that's an extreme. But the point is, if I can deal, even if I deal as a human being much lower in rung to someone who's much bigger, but I speak to them as a human being, it becomes much more influential. So that's what Anatomy of Peace really deals with.
Okay. Thank you, Nikhil. And so today we discussed about how we can, how it is to, build this learning culture in the organization. Not an easy task. What we can sum up things as usually an external pressure or an external trigger helps it doing it more. But I think the success will lie when it becomes intrinsic and we, not under any pressure, feel develop that self-directed learning, and the organization can help in various building those mechanisms in making that easier for that individual. And then we can talk about clearly, hey, we can build a learning culture in the organization. Thank you, Nikhil.
My pleasure.